Good morning. Good morning and welcome to season 9 of Gather for Her. I'm Tina O. I'm your moderator, and I'm grateful to be connecting with all of you here from Naqualaquam, also known as Bowen Island, BC, Canada, on the soil originally named as Turtle Island, now known as the continent of North America. I'm grateful to rest my head, to play and to co-create on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories and land and home to the Squamish people. You've just dropped into Gather for Her, where we invite you to be part of our co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors, brought to you by Powerhouse and produced by Regen Media. At Powerhouse, if you're new to Powerhouse, what we do is we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work as they walk their path of whole leadership, guided by relational leadership practices and Indigenous wisdom. Our impact media producer is Regen Media, who invites us to take the power of media into our own hands by supporting stories that heal, regenerate, uplift, and transform. And we're here every 2 weeks, here live on LinkedIn. You can join in with us, join into the chat with us. Every time we gather here to dive into these changemaker conversations, we follow up these conversations with an interactive private wisdom circle that's held in our community of practice called the Leader Path here. And it's like we're gathering at a virtual fire. And I'll tell you more about that later. I am going to pop in a few times in this conversation to introduce you to some other things that we have going on in the house, available for leaders like you that are ready to elevate and decolonize your leadership by walking an integrated path of whole relational leadership guided by Indigenous wisdom. This conversation is live, and so we would love it if you would introduce yourself in the chat here on LinkedIn as a listener or a viewer. Say hello, let us know where you're connecting in from with an acknowledgement of gratitude for the lands where you rest, play, and grow. And that might be new for you, and we welcome that here. Relational leadership begins with awareness. It's followed by a practice, like literally practicing. And then we carry that forward to future generations with an integrated knowing from our lived experience. So you can be awkward here. We invite that. Come as you are, learn here with us, because we're all softening and growing and co-creating this world that we're living into together. Okay, so let's begin. I'm going to pass to my sisters in change making and let them introduce themselves, and then we'll introduce our special guest today. In a moment, we'll come to you, Heather Murphy of Authentically. She is also an Amplify coach, and Amplify is our relational leadership certification program and Amplify path, where we support you to bring your change work forward in the world. So we're going to introduce you in a moment, Heather, but first, I'm going to pass to you, Christina, to introduce yourself in the way that you want to this morning. Over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Whatever time zone you happen to be in, I happen to be in coffee time zone, so that's what I'm doing. And I also happen to be in Sharon's beautiful, welcoming home. So I'm very pleased to be here. It's super fun. Sharon's down the hall. I'm very excited about this conversation, and because I love talking about relational leadership, because in the work that I do in the world, dysfunction seldom happens at the technical level and always happens at the relational level. So that means functionality and excellence happens at the relational level too. So I am very excited about this. And I'm going to pass over to Sharon, whose lovely home I'm in.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be here with everyone today. And yes, this conversation on relational leadership is a hot topic today, and it's something that we discuss in my MBA program. It's something that's being talked about throughout all the First Nations organizations that I've worked with and know of. And so I'm excited to dig in. But first, a little bit about me. I am a mother of 2 children who are in university right now. I am a student. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm one of the co-hosts of Gather, and I am an Amplify coach as well. And I am here coming to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Snuneymuxw and the Snuneymuxw First Nations the Coast Salish people here on Vancouver Island. And I am actually Métis Cree from Treaty 6 territory, Edmonton in particular. And I'll pass it on to Charlene.
Good morning. Welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome you from my home here on the Sunshine Coast, where we are so fortunate to live, work, and play on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Squamish First Peoples. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. As the founder of Powerhouse and Regen, what I'm really excited to lean into today is what is the intersectionality between fabulous and fierce founders and relational leadership. Because that's, I think, part of the intersection of where I think the energy of some, of us here in this room and others that are listening to the conversation. I'm excited to introduce our very special guest today and tell you just a little bit about Heather Murphy. So I'm going to read her bio and then I might ad-lib just a tiny bit at the end. Heather is a proud member of the Métis Nation, and in her journey to uncover her identity as a woman and mother, she fuels her passion to support other Métis, Inuit, and First Nations women in their journeys of entrepreneurship. She has been highly involved at Women Entrepreneurs of Saskatchewan since 2015. She teaches workshops from unlocking the keys to getting found online to wasting less time on social media. She has over a decade of speaking and teaching experience and is passionate about sharing information to empower business owners and individuals to be their best. Her keynotes cover everything from branding and current marketing trends to entrepreneurship, and of course, the power of femininity. There's so much we could dig into. So I am just really excited. I was originally introduced and told about Heather by a friend, woman, colleague, mentor that just really said, you need to get to know this woman. And it's taken us a few years to come to this place. But I think the timing is just perfect and the conversation is just perfect. And a big part of relational leadership for me is those interconnected introductions and referrals that just continues to grow our web of wonder just a little bit bigger. So welcome, Heather. And I just love to give you a chance to introduce yourself and maybe fill in some of the gaps.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here. I'm so honored to stand with strong women and women who are carrying the very important torch of sharing knowledge and sharing wisdom with humility and putting a real focus on how important Indigenous wisdom is for our country and for our world. So thank you for having me. I'm very proud to be speaking from Treaty 4 territory. This is the land of the Cree, the Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and my nation, the Métis Nation. I'm from Prince Albert. My ancestors are from Fort Delacorne, Cumberland House, Moose Factory Cree Nation, and White Bear First Nation. And I'm so honored. I'm so honored to be with you here today.
All right. Well, we're just going to give Tia a sec to get her mic going. I'm happy to kick off the first round of conversation, and that is this whole season. We've really been digging into the concept of relational leadership, and I'd love to just start by asking you, Heather, when you hear me say that phrase, how would you describe that? And also in that description, why is it important to you? How's it shown up in your life and showing its importance in your life?
Well, when I hear the term relational leadership, I think about it a lot differently to what we would expect from more of a patriarchal structure or more of a traditional business structure. So a traditional business structure would be top down, like this is the way that it works, and there's consequences and external motivation, where I see relational leadership with more humility and intrinsic motivation. So it reminds me of a Cree mama sitting around a fire with a little one going by the fire, and she might make a kissing sound at him to warn him not to burn himself. And if he doesn't listen, he'll burn himself. And either way, he learns that his mom has his best intentions in mind and that fire's hot. And so in my mind, that's a really good example of what relational leadership is. It's, providing some guidance, but not needing to be in the seat of control, and allowing things to unfold and allowing people to develop internal motivators. So when I think of teammates with internal motivators, that's the kind of people that will work all weekend if they have to, or all evening if they have to, because they're so committed and tied into a purpose. And it's a lot different than trying to get a $10,000 bonus, right, when you're internally motivated. And so I think it's important for a lot of reasons. And one of them is because it is more of an Indigenous and matriarchal approach. And because our young people aren't motivated by the same things that we used to be motivated by. Our young people are motivated by a sense of purpose. So it's not just important from an Indigenous perspective. I think it's also important for the next nation that we're raising.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for covering me for there, Shar. I lost you on my screen for a second. Where did you go? I want to pick up on what you offered there, Heather, because I haven't heard that example before, coming from a Western lens, which I do. And, we're certainly my generation, Gen Xers, we're notorious for helicopter parenting. And I don't think that's just in parenting. I would call it helicopter leadership, like really wanting to protect our teams from the mistakes, whatever that means, that there are the puddles they can fall into. And I heard you say it's like whether they get burned by the fire or not, there's a lesson there. I'm just wondering if you can, say more about that from that relational response and perhaps in the Indigenous wisdom piece of that.
Well, part of the learnings that have been given to me by my ancestors have to do with bears. And so I've been studying bears a lot lately and watching them and trying to learn the lessons that I don't even necessarily want to see. And some of the things are, if her cubs aren't doing the things that they need to do to survive, she'll leave them. And that's an awful thought to have as a mother, that you could leave your child. But at the same time, that child has the responsibility to survive. Right. So if you put it in a leadership perspective, like for me, it's all about giving up a sense of control. I cannot control you. I cannot put internal controls on you. If you're part of my team, right? I can lead you to the water. I can give you food. I can give you nourishment. I can not force you to eat it. So whether or not your team survives is up to them. So you want to give them everything that they can to survive and thrive. But it's not about the forcing or the control. And relinquishing some of that control for me in the last year or so has reduced my anxiety quite a bit as well, because the onus is not on me. I can control what's right here, and I can control what I bring to you as a nurturer or what I bring to you as a knowledge keeper, but I cannot force you to take it.
I don't know who wants to pick up on this, but I'm wondering from a systems lens, Christine. Oh, God, Sharon's got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to there's two things that caught my attention when you told the story of the grandmother letting the child, or not actually raising her voice, which really caught my attention. She didn't raise her voice, which, I think I mean, I've been guilty of that myself as a young mother. Oh my God, like freaking out. And I mean, that doesn't do anything. That doesn't do anything except raise your anxiety and raise the poor child's anxiety. And so there's a lot of emotional intelligence in what you're talking about. Emotional intelligence in the ability to lose control, or lose the need to be in control, and also to just maintain your emotional control, so that you're not freaking out at that child. Oh my God, they're too close to the fire and screaming, right? So, and the emotional intelligence part is I find that I feel that it's very closely related to relational leadership for Indigenous, when we speak of Indigenous wisdom. Can you speak a little bit more to that, Heather? Does that make sense, what I'm asking? Or
Can you expand on it a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I can't.
I think I have something. Let me see. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, just give me 1 second. Okay.
Because I know you'll have other instances where like the wisdom, it's intrinsically an Indigenous wisdom. There you never hear of yelling, you never hear of like they stand back, and they're reserved, and yet they're very, very you get the point, and you either follow it or you don't, and there's the lesson there.
But to me, what's really alive in that is the idea of even the ribbon skirt. So I was at a buffalo harvesting ceremony yesterday, and I called one of my girlfriends because I wasn't sure exactly what I should be wearing or how I should be showing up. And I was going out to my sons are Cree, and so we went out to their Cree nation, and I'm Métis. So I don't know all of the ways that I could show up respectfully. And so she had mentioned a ribbon skirt, and if I didn't have one, to wear a long skirt. So I wore a long skirt, and it wasn't about just modesty or being a good girl. She said, "You are so powerful, and all of your creation center between your legs is so powerful. So you want to direct that power towards the earth instead of towards other people." And I thought that was just like a brilliant piece of wisdom for me, because I went there not feeling disempowered, like I was hiding myself, but like I was connecting to the earth. And there was a little child there running around in the fire and putting snow on the fire, and no one was stopping him. And from a Western lens, that feels disrespectful. There was an elder speaking, and it took all of my control to not tell that little guy to like come sit with me and have a snack and stop it, but his parents were there and they weren't saying anything, so that wasn't my place. And so that, I mean, there's a kind of humility that comes with leadership, where you would think that you're just like falling under the wayside, but in that situation, I'm in a position of leadership by learning, right? By giving up the humility to say, okay, how are you operating? How are you raising your children? How are you connecting with your people in this situation? And what do I have to learn, instead of needing to steer the conversation or to drive it? There can be a gentleness. And I've seen cookums, or grandmas sit back and, signal their children over, and they might gently lead them, or they might distract them with something, like give them something to need or something to do. But in that situation, it wasn't my place to lead that child. If I had more of a relationship there, then there would be an opportunity for me to say something.
I think I might be picking up where you're going with this. And what I mean by that is, again, noticing my Western mind, right? My Western mind wants to name things and point at things and understand them and say, I have control of this concept, rather than let them live in this concept live in a relational way. And I just, because I want to connect this back to leadership. I just did a workshop with Kathy Camilleri called The Village. And when in the first part of the workshop, we were in circle as an Indigenous community, and she put us in, like, we were stepping into this role so we could live that experience. And she offered to us that children sit in the front of the fire. They sit in the front. They sit there. We put children in the center. And when we do that, we empower the children and we stand behind them. We don't stand in front of them. And so then I had a conversation with another organization that is going through a transition. And there was a question around how does this transition impact the leaders, and how do we support the leaders? And my mind went back to the village workshop, and it was like, we put those leaders, those students, because that's who they provide their services for. We put those students at the front of the fire. We put them center, and we stand behind the students. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is how the Indigenous wisdom of relational being as a family translates into leadership. And so what I was hearing you say there, Heather, is that grandmother was putting the child at the center of the fire and standing behind them rather than in front of them. Would I be hearing that right? Am I not right, but did those dots connect for you as well from a leadership lens and from Indigenous wisdom?
I think that sounds powerful. I don't know if it's exactly the same thing, but it feels powerful. And, for myself, like, there's been a lot of awkwardness. Like, I called my friend to ask what to wear. There's some awkwardness that happens while you're learning and while you're adjusting and while you're finding yourself grounded in a new way of being or a new way of doing something or a new way of leading a team. So allowing people at the center of the fire, I like that concept. To allow some of that, well, what should I be wearing? Is it okay if I'm wearing jeans? Or why shouldn't I be wearing jeans? Or how do I do a land acknowledgement? Or what happens if I see myself one way and I might be speaking out of turn? Or if I use language that's not something that belongs in this space? And how do we gently say, like, how do we make that kissing sound to be like that's not how we do it here. And like, let's have a conversation about that and unpack what it means for you.
Thank you. Christina, I want to pass to you. Systems lens, lady over there. I'm curious what's coming up for you in this conversation.
Well, Heather, I think what this conversation is doing for me right now is actually deepening my own understanding of the importance of, first of all, allowing people to be self-directed and to learn from a place of wonder and curiosity. And you exemplified that by making the phone call, what do I wear, from a place of curiosity. And also from a place of risk. How do I do this without making any assumptions, and just be curious? And so I love the image of the skirt and the power of femininity. So I'm curious if you'll talk a little bit more about that. How do you incorporate that into the work that you do in the world? Because that's something I'm very curious about, because our traditional leadership styles have not embraced the power of femininity. So I'd love to hear more about that.
That's incorporating some of these Indigenous teachings that I've been gifted with in the last season of my life is something I'm still working towards, but femininity is something interesting. And I wrote my first article on Forbes on something called the woman effect. Have you heard of that? No. So it's this really interesting phenomenon. It can be observed and documented by science about when a woman comes in a room, the atmosphere changes. So men behave differently, and you can measure it when a woman is in the room. So when a woman is not in the room, there can be more violence, there can be more aggression. But when she comes into the room, they soften. And you can really see it with little boys. So I have 3 little boys. You put my little niece, my little 3-year-old niece, in the same room with them. They're not swearing. They're not throwing each other to the ground. They're making sure she has something to eat. They become nurturers. And so women are powerful, and you can observe, it can be observed in high-level CEOs as well. So when a high-level CEO who's a male has a child, If that CEO has a daughter, he's more likely to increase family benefits and wages throughout the company. Or if that man has a son, he is more likely to take more bonuses for himself. And I mean, there's lots of things you can unpack there. I don't know all the meaning behind it, but that's just the data, right? So the power of femininity, you know, I have been advocating for years for women to run businesses differently. And like I have taught classes with a Spider-Man on my shoulders because there was no childcare that day. Right. As a solo mom, I need that flexibility. And I'm determined to have a really solid career, and I'm determined to raise amazing men. So there are things that need to happen in that where without guilt, like hiring a housekeeper. That has to happen. That's the first thing I pay before I pay anything else. You know, like I have to have that so that I can feel grounded in all the areas of my life. And I think that is really an Indigenous way of being. And if you look at Métis people and how Métis people lived, I was just looking at some archives today of Métis women taking the hides off of buffalo with babies tied to their backs. So like, I think that is a more integrated and natural way of being. And I think with this pandemic, more people have had to learn how to work in an integrated way as parents, as mothers, and as fathers. And I think it's just the way we should be. And so for years, I've been advocating for that and helping female entrepreneurs build their businesses because I think it's natural.
I'm just going to pause for a sec, if that's okay, Christina. We might have some new people joining us. So I just want to let people know where you are. If you're just finding us here on LinkedIn, this is Gather for Her. It's a co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors, brought to you by Powerhouse and produced by Regen Media. And we're live here every 2 weeks on LinkedIn. And then, as you probably are noticing, there's some juicy bits that really deserve some more time to unpack. So we follow up these live conversations with a private interactive wisdom circle in our community of practice on the Leader Path, which you are more than invited to join. And our community of practice is for whole conscious leaders bridging Western leadership practices with relational ways of leading guided by Indigenous wisdom. So you can find out more about that at powerhouse.com. And if you are brand new to the conversation, come on over to the chat and let us know where you're connecting from. We will follow up with you with a little message saying, hey, glad that you connected with us. How can we serve you? So back to our guest, Heather Murphy, and the conversation. And I think, Christina, you had something you were going to jump in with, yeah?
I guess I just wanted to almost close the loop a little bit for myself, because here's what I'm taking away in particular, because I work with governing bodies, and even the way the room is set up is very hierarchical, right? If you're observing a governing body in place, they're behind desks, and it's and folks that are observing are farther away, and that's part of the governing process is the business of observing and governing. But what I'm taking away here is even energetically thinking about your governing process as a circle. And oftentimes I will tell folks, put children in the front row. But now here's what I'm taking away. The language is put boys and girls, like the feminine aspect, like put boys and girls, not just children, but recognizing that actually having that feminine energy, make your decision with those girls and boys in mind when you're governing. And so I just want to, for how do we practically implement these kind of things into our work? How do we practically engage? How do we take the conversation into a tangible action? Is doing those things from an energetic perspective. So thank you, Heather, for that.
Well, I just want to add, even just allowing children in the room. I mean, yes, of course. Like, why wouldn't we? And I don't know. Throughout the pandemic, in our Zoom sessions, we've had, how taxing it has been for so many families. they're at home with their kids and apologizing for, I'm sorry, but if you can hear my baby crying in the background, or sorry if you can see my children playing in front of, I'm on Zoom, so now they have to come and see what mommy's doing and whatnot. And that is something that I've noticed many years ago working with Indigenous communities, is that is just, it's allowed and it's accepted, and not shame on you for thinking otherwise, but it certainly made me think differently. And then the pandemic has sped that up for other people, and it had people rethink how they do business.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that concept, because when I taught with my son, that's not something that most people were doing, and I determined within myself that I was not going to apologize, that I just introduced him as my junior consultant, and he's here today, period. And but I was I'm considering doing a master's degree in Indigenous nation building, and so I was at a seminar, and one of the parts of the particular program that I'm looking at is going into the northern communities and doing practical work there. And this is a program that was developed in communication or in relationship with the communities in the north, and they said that this part needs to happen. And so like the portage needs to happen, the jigging needs to happen, that all of this needs to happen as part of your learning, because you can't come in and tell us, just like with the colonial idea, you can't come in and tell us what to do if you haven't experienced it. And still, it's not about telling us what to do, it's about being in relationship with us and opening doors, right? It's because we are internally motivated. So that piece was really interesting to me. And I mentioned to them, I fall into a statistic of an Indigenous woman raising Indigenous children with no support. How am I going to be able to do this? Like, how am I going to be able to do these practicums? And it was a no-brainer to the other Indigenous women in this call. Well, obviously you'll bring them and they will learn too, because they remove barriers. And this is not something that you would hear from a post-secondary institution with a Western mindset. It would be, well, you're going to have to find childcare, because do you want this degree or not? Consequences, external motivation, right? So
I want to toss to Shar next, but before I do, I know we're talking a lot about children, and great, because that's a big piece, but I'm digging in a little bit to the wisdom. Like, it's almost like if children were the metaphor, like if we shifted our system of putting children first, or inviting them in the room, like what is that doing to our leadership, or what's the information in that it's going to shift our relational ways of being in team? I don't know. That's what's alive for me. But I want to toss to you, Shar. I don't know if that's present for you or something else. What's alive for you right now?
Yeah, actually it's very present for me, because I would encourage us to take it just one step beyond the physical representation of a child. I think that's where we were guided to start the conversation, for sure. But, as we've heard Christina say for, a long time, like, what if we were making our decisions on behalf of our children? So I think the guidance, if I'm listening through the words of this conversation and not to the words, it would be, relational leadership is the type of integration that we actually had to experience through the pandemic. We actually had to live through it, where what if we were literally working with the energy of our children clambered around us, so that we might remember that as whole, healed leaders, moving forward, every decision was from that place, absolutely and only for the children. That's where it takes me in this conversation. And so I'm curious if we dug down deeper into, okay, so what is the implementation? Like, what do we do with that? What does the implementation of that look like, feel like, sound like, And Heather gave us a wonderful example. You know, it's about, no, it's about removing barriers for people. It's about providing a loose framework and an invitation and an opportunity, but not dictating or controlling how something is going to happen or show up. You know, curious where that leads the conversation.
I wonder, Heather, if you can speak to, you know, as a business owner of Authentically, right, and where you work individually with businesses to authentically bring their whole self, you know, to their work, and you also, as an Amplify instructor and coach, you're working with entrepreneurs. I wonder if you can answer that question, what Shar just brought into the room from that lens, how you work with entrepreneurs, maybe.
Yeah, I think, you know, with entrepreneurs, for me anyway, because that's the big part where I lead as a mother because I'm thick in the weeds there, but I lead as a coach one-on-one, right? So when I'm working to bring someone's brand forward, a lot of that has to do with listening, really listening. I probably spend my first 2 hours with any client asking a million questions. And I'm an intuitive, so I'll have visions while I'm talking to them. I'll see things in my mind while I'm talking to them. I'll have an opinion of their website. I'll have an opinion of their marketing. But I try not to say anything in the beginning because their dreams are important and their vision is important. And what I feel like they should do is not as important as really hearing and seeing and being with them. And so I think part of that kind of matriarchal approach is not, I don't need to force it to look like what I think it should look like. I need to let it be what it is. And I need to come along to support, and I can make suggestions. And so I'll often refer to myself as kind of like a business chiropractor, where I'll go in and say, this should be here. I think this should be here. And if you want to give it to me to do, I'm going to do it with your vision in mind. So I become like a surrogate for that vision instead of trying to force it or to try to put it into a formula. Like, this is how we do it, and so you need to fit into my box. That's not my approach. My approach is more like, there is a vision there. Like a sculptor will approach a piece of stone in two different ways. One sculptor will go in with a drawing and a vision and try to make it be that. I think that's more of that external control, where a different sculptor will go in, like, for example, Michelangelo with David. He went in and he made the most anatomically correct sculpture that had ever been made until that time, by seeing it already in the stone and revealing it. And so I see myself as kind of like that excavator of what's already there, because I believe that everybody who comes to me with a vision, that vision has merit and value, and that needs to be honored. And it doesn't need to be dismantled by me thinking I'm so smart. What's so smart is the wisdom that's already there.
Thank you. Yeah, where are we now? Christina.
So what you're talking about really requires like grounded patience, I'm guessing. So how do you cultivate that grounded presence? Because oftentimes in our very, I want this like quickly, and we want to move quickly on things, and then we often experience the consequences of that later on. How do you set the table for the journey of that work?
Yeah, there are definitely people who think that they want to be one way or they want it to be a certain way, but sometimes it takes a slowing down or really listening to create that grounded connection, and then to say, I understand that you're wanting to go to these tactics right away, but we haven't looked at your essence. Like we need the foundation before we can boil it down to its essence. And those pieces can happen quickly, but if I don't have like the roots, then you're going to spend a lot of money on something that's not going to be effective. Right. So slowing down, a lot of people will come to you with tactics in business. I'm sure you've all experienced that. Like, I need to have a Facebook page that does this, this, and this. I understand that you want that, but let's talk. Let's have a conversation about like what's really at the core of why you're wanting to choose this tactic. Like I don't just pick up a bottle of ink and try to hammer nail into the wall with it. Like you like, why, right? It comes down to that, like really unpack your heart for me, so, and then there are certain physical things I have to do for myself to ground myself too. Is that one of the things you're speaking to, Christina?
I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah.
Sometimes, because I pick up a lot of people's energy when I'm working with them too. When you're asking a lot of questions and when you're really allowing yourself to deeply connect with someone, sometimes their stuff can get on you. So it's important for me. I always have incense or sage near me, and I have it burning almost always. I almost always have a candle. I need fire by me. Somehow it makes me feel like I stay in my body. I like to have something heavy, like I have this heavy sheepskin. Sometimes I have to put that on my lap. And I have a few different office chairs because sometimes I need to rock to move the energy through my body. And so there's a few different things I've had to learn to ground myself in doing intuitive work, and allow myself to stay present in this process. And another thing I think is important is really checking in if you're working with the right clients, if you want their energy moving through you or no. Because sometimes you have to turn people away because you don't want that on you.
Thank
Bam.
you. All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for everybody listening to this conversation, finding your own way of knowing, like I'm guessing that there's going to be tons of empaths, tons of intuitive folks that do experience that trying to determine what's my energy and what's theirs. And so what you just said, finding your own way from a place of curiosity and wonder to allow the energy to move through you and not get stuck in you. That's gold. That's gold. Thank you.
And I want to say that's relational leadership, because that's actually, there's relationship to self, relationship to each other, and relationship to the world, and checking in on each of those distinct circles of where you're at. And what we talk about a lot in Powerhouse is you move at the speed of right relationship. You move at the speed of safety. You move at the speed of connection. So I think there's a piece for us Western brains that like we jump and we like, what? No. Stay integrated as you move from circle 1 to circle 2 to circle 3. So we're just moving into our last kind of 10 minutes. And I want to just ask this third question to you, Heather. From your change maker perspective, what do you think is the most important practice as a relational leader? And maybe we just touched on it. I don't know, but go.
Yeah, I definitely had some notes on this. And the biggest one is having the humility to really listen and connect. And whether you're working with Indigenous peoples or not, I think that's really important, because everybody, when you have a vision for something, it's sacred to you. It's precious to you. And who am I to say that it's wrong? If you take a look at, the residential school system is coming in and saying, I'm going to be your savior, versus saying, let me learn from you. And let me make this kissing sound at you, and let me lead you to the water, and let me lead you to where the berries are the most ripe, and let me put my hands at your back, because I am not the one carrying your fire. Your fire might dance around me, but I'm not carrying your fire. You are, and that's a sacred role that you're playing. And so I honor the sacredness in you. I think that that's the biggest thing, is that humble listening.
Sharon, you're in my brain, so I'm passing to you.
Again, I'll go back to emotional intelligence, and it just has been resonating so much in this conversation. There is a humbleness in everything that you've talked about. And so how can that be? How can that be when Indigenous people have been so persecuted and dishonored, and how can we have that emotional stance with everything that's going on in the world today?
Well, I think humility is not to be confused with a lack of fierceness. And humility is not to be confused with a lack of boundary. So having the humility to say, okay, you have this much money to work with and you'd like to accomplish all of these things. I'm not going to try to force your budget. I'm going to try to figure out how I can meet your budget. However, I am not underselling myself because I'm really good at what I do. You know, or like if you look at Métis, the Métis traditions, right? Like Métis people have had so many things taken from them again and again and again and again, and they kept getting up and fighting for it. Right. So there's, I think what happens is this cracking open when your heart's been so deeply broken. There's a depth of compassion and a depth of understanding and a depth of wisdom that comes from that. And it's almost like an unlearning. I thought I knew everything. Now that I've been cracked open, or from years in business, years, say, not being able to pay the CRA, or years with people chasing you for things, or years of, famine and financially, like when you're an entrepreneur, you have these different seasons that come in, or betrayals, or a team member that doesn't work out and breaks your heart, or that didn't listen to the wisdom that you offered to them. There's all of these disappointments that happen. And for me personally, that cracking open has led to a deep compassion, a deep need to not control because I realize I can't, a willingness to let it be what it is, and to try to see the truth through that. Like to try to see through all the mud and pain and see what are we really trying to say here? What are we really trying to accomplish? And if our visions were in alignment and are no longer in alignment, can I let it go? Or can we come back into alignment? Those are, I don't know if I kind of roundabout answered your question or if I even hit it, but for me, that's where my humility comes from, falling on my face.
And thank you so much for that, because that yes, that completely answered my question, and it just relational leadership is it's not about yourself. It's not thinking about yourself. It's not that you're forgetting yourself, but that's not the motivation behind anything. It's very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move us into our closing section, if I may. We're into our last kind of 3 minutes, and we usually close this with a "What are we leaving with?" So I'm gonna. Anybody feel like they're ready to talk about what they're like? What are you leaving with? What is? Go for it, Shar.
I'm leaving with revisiting what came up for us in our last fire circle with, there is a crack. We're cracked, we're wide open, but it is from that crack that our greatness will grow. I think interconnected relational leadership is understanding that I don't have the answer and you don't have the answer. But by bringing our gifts together and really understanding that the greatness is actually what runs between us, that's what excites me about this conversation. And I think we're going to continue to be broken wide open until we learn that lesson. The greatness is the glue right in between us, and that's what I'm leaving with today from this conversation.
Thanks, Shar.
It's funny because Tina always says that what's said in the first 5 minutes is like the gold, and then we spend the rest of the time unpacking it. And your first story, the story that you told about the mother at the fire, is that was absolute gold. And we just spent the rest of the time unpacking that, right? The humility, courage, and fierce energy required to relinquish control and let people be self-directed, and to listen, and to invite curiosity into the room and be in it for the long game. We're in it for the long game, and our well-being is tied up with one another. Constantly reminded that our well-being is tied up with one another, and so these conversations matter. Thank you, Heather.
Yes, thank you, Heather. I will echo Christina and Shar, and I am. What comes to mind for me is vulnerability. I mean, all of it. I mean, going back to your story about the grandmother, like she's putting herself in a vulnerable position by not like just having to sit back and watch what happens, right? And knowing that was the best for the child, and so just allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and authentic in this process, and knowing that, as was already said, we don't have all the answers, but I think if we follow our intuition, if we follow our heart, we can't go wrong. And so thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharon. Heather, what an amazing conversation. And I'm so grateful that you're part of the house. I'm so grateful for the wisdom that you are bringing to the circle of Powerhouse. I'm leaving with the reminder of my current path right now and teaching is about letting go of control. And I'm slippery. I'll just name it. I'm super slippery because I like emergence is my work. That's my work. And yet I have developed a slippery practice of controlling emergence so that for whatever reason. So I am really present with the example of letting the child being learning from the grandmother and trusting that spirit, creator, universe, source, whatever we want to call it, is actually holding us, and I don't have to. So thank you for that. And I'm going to give you the last word, Heather, and then we'll close this with our gratitudes from Powerhouse. Over to you, Heather.
First of all, I just want to say again, what an honor it is to be among you and among everybody who's listening. And it's been a real honor to share some of the things that have been on my heart. I can get into a real academic place, but what I'm really learning is once you know who you are, it's so important to connect to community. And I'm so thankful to have found a community to connect to. And I'm more than sharing the things that are on my heart. I'm also very eager to hear some of the things that are on yours, and to watch the rest of this season, and to connect more with the Powerhouse team, and to connect with the people in the Amplify program.
You rock. Well, I'm so glad you're here. And all of you rock too that are joining us live. Thank you for joining us on Gather for Her, our co-created conversation with global leaders, change makers, and social impactors. This conversation has been recorded, and so you can catch it on our YouTube channel. Again, you can also see it or listen to it rather in our podcast called The How for Her, which you can find on Spotify and all the other places that you listen. Gather for Her is hosted by Powerhouse, where we walk beside leaders to amplify their change work as they walk their path of whole leadership, guided by relational leadership practices and Indigenous wisdom. So many thanks to our impact media producer and sister company, Regen Media, who reminds us that we can take the power of media into our own hands when we support stories that heal and regenerate, uplift, and transform. Thank you also to the hands at our back, at Powerhouse's back, and Regen's digital storytellers, Zoe Gray, Madeline Archibald, and Willow Smith. And thanks to my co-hosts and sisters in change, the braid here of us here at Powerhouse, Charlene, Christina, and Sharon, and me. And to all of you, our listeners, our community of change makers. And that's the key word. You might be listeners, but really you're the community of change makers that the world is asking for right now. Thank you to all of you for walking with us in co-creation of the world we're living into together. And if you're new here, I want you to know you're always welcome here every week when we gather here on Gather for Her. And then, of course, in our community of practice on the Leader Path at Powerhouse. So much love to all of you. Thank you again. And we will see you in a couple weeks here on LinkedIn, or we'll see you in the house on the path. Have a great day, everybody, and a great, beautiful Changemaker week. We'll see you again.